You are listening to The Ben Keech Show, where every day the objective is simple. Ben will never stop fighting the fight and lighting the light on topics that affect you every day.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben, and this is the Ben Keech Show, and I am so thankful that you decided to join us today. I am excited about the next 4 episodes. I have been mulling over some thoughts and some ideas of what I wanted to do, and what I'm going to do in the next 4 episodes is kind of take you sequentially through 4 seasons of my life. We're going to get down to some details, talk about a lot of things. And the purpose isn't just so you know more about me or can answer correctly questions about me in a trivia contest, which would never happen, but more so that my story, my experiences somehow connect to you. The lessons from it, the examples, you're going to have differences, but yet there's this path that we're on. We're all on a path. And so I thought that this might be an interesting way to kind of run these next 4 episodes. So I'm super excited. And just a couple quick updates. I got a daughter that's graduating college in a month. I was in Georgia at a conference that was so exciting to speak at. Still working on a bunch of things, book, etc. So, you know the deal, folks. I love for you to act. You know what I really would like you to do? This is actually kind of a new thing. I need reviews, okay, on my Apple and Spotify. I need more reviews. I need good reviews. I need that to kind of start to blow up. So I'm going to kind of focus on that also, and just simply from the bottom of my heart, help me out on that if you can. I would love it. I would appreciate it. Thank you so much, wherever you are watching this show. So the name of this episode, 46 times we've been talking together, is It All Started on a Beach. It all started on a beach. And I don't know about you. Some of you believe in God. Some of you don't. We all have our perspective, I guess, on that. And without getting into any type of deep look at that, my story started on a beach. And here's how my story began. My dad was not going to go into the Vietnam War if he had anything to do with it. He had lived in New York. He had lived in Kansas City, and he had decided Canada, with other people in the late 60s, early 70s, was not a bad place to go if you wanted to stay away from the war. He got an idea back in the day to hitchhike, and he hitchhiked all across America. And at one point ended up on a beach in California. That beach in California, there was a man who gave him a track. Now, for you younger millennials, you may not know what a track is, but a track was basically a pamphlet that told people about Christ, what it meant to be a Christian, what it meant to be a follower of God, and the gospel message wrapped up in a small pamphlet. My dad was far from a Christian. He was living a pretty interesting life in Kansas City, and we'll get in all those details. Don't want to embarrass the old man, but he was not a follower of God in any sense, but he followed some things, but it would be closely related to drugs and women. He met this guy, never seen him before, and gave him this track. He told my dad about Christ. My dad came back from California, back to Kansas City, and his friends were confused. Like, whoa, you're different. What's going on? Now, I understand my dad had no concept really of Christianity. He didn't understand. He didn't know the stories. He didn't know the verses. He just knew there was something different about him, and he wanted to figure it out. Now you say, what does that have to do with my story? Well, I can't tell you my story except for to say that man on that beach changed the trajectory of so many different Keeches. You know, it's interesting. We talk sometimes within Christian circles about, when do you tell people about this? When do you tell people about that? Well, you're going to be offensive, and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. And I sometimes think, what if that guy thought that? Like, who of us, myself included, goes up to strangers on a beach and say, hey, I got something I want to tell you about? He decided to do that. And I think there's something probably interesting about that time period, which I would love to get back to, just kind of a free nature of expression. And we're in the midst of of radical changes going on in our country, most of which for the better. And there was just a freedom that he felt to do that. Well, Dad comes back. He's a born again Christian. He's got the long hair. He looks like a hippie. He's not always that clean. I mean, I don't know, today he is. And he embarks on his walk with Christ. Shortly thereafter, meets my mom. And my mom had her own radical transformation. Neither one of them were quote unquote brought up in like a Christ-centered house, if that makes sense. And so they were almost like the Michael J. Fox of Family Ties, kind of going against the grain, going against their family. A lot of times when we think about people going against the grain, we kind of think of usually more of like liberal, kind of bucking the conservative mentality. And this was a reverse situation, which makes it interesting, I think. We sometimes forget that that's how it was for what was called the Fourth Great Awakening in the history of the United States, which was the Jesus movement in the late 60s, early 70s. So my mom, a new follower of Christ, my dad, a new follower of Christ, very much hippies, very much flower children, from the music to the outfits to even their mentality, against kind of the status quo, against misplaced values, if you will. And my mom decided to make everybody in her family mad by, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom at 18 and I'm going to have these kids. Lo and behold, that's what my mom and dad did. They had 5 kids between the ages, between her age of 18 and 33, had 5 kids. My dad worked, tough blue collar work, didn't make a lot of money. My mom stayed at home with us from day one and until the day that she died, which she died at 35. If you haven't listened to episode 2, I know we're at 46. If you want to go back to episode 2, it might be worth it to kind of understand some of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Episode 3 talks a little bit more about my dad. But anyway, so I grew up in a Christian household, a politically conservative household, and that was my roots. We did not play video games very much. We had a neighborhood full of kids, and we played outside all the time. We roamed the neighborhood. We stayed out late. We didn't get in trouble except for picking on our little brothers, basically. And I had a glorious childhood as a kid that was just able to get outside and play. It's definitely part of my mentality of kids stuck in a bedroom by themselves, playing video games all the time. I just don't think it's what's best for kids. But that's a different topic. So I grow up, and as I got older, I'm my own person. I saw things I liked and didn't like about my mom and dad, just like you guys did. I was the oldest of the 5 kids, so I took kind of a leadership role within my siblings. Loved all my siblings very much, got along with them. I probably abused my brother in certain ways. We're, best friends today, but it was, that was our life. It was very much a very typical American upbringing. 2 parents, loved each other, raising us, going to church on Sundays, playing outside all the time. And I was a behavior problem in school. It's a different issue for another day, but I love my childhood. And as I got older as I got into my teenage years, I saw things that I wanted to be different. I realized I was different. And I would sometimes be very brazen with my approach to my dad. So, for instance, I think we should do this. And I would usurp his authority a lot of times by being just kind of in his face about how I think our family should go, what I think we should do. And this began an unhealthy obsession of mine of family. He said, well, how can you have an unhealthy obsession of family? It wasn't that my ideas were wrong. My ideas were actually probably spot on. We need to do more family movies. We need to do more family get-togethers. Like, I was just a big believer in all 7 of us doing things together as much as possible. We went to church together and we ate dinner together, which is important. I mean, it's interesting in 2024, we don't do those 2 things nearly as often as we probably should. We did those 2 things, but I did want more. There's something I wanted, and my dad would sometimes say, when you have kids someday, you do it your way. And again, as someone I was arrogant, and felt like I knew the right answers and what to do. I'm like, well, of course I'm going to do that. And that's yes. And I would get flippant. Now, I'm going to stop this story for a second and explain why this stuff is important. We have issues with our past, our parents. Some of us, hopefully all of us to some extent, depending on your circumstances, are grateful. We appreciate the sacrifices our parents made. Our parents, we may say, raised us in the way that they knew best. And now we may know different or better. Although I'm always going to be quick to say the present isn't necessarily better. As we continue to make changes, whatever changes we've made over the last 100 years, they're not all good. Some people believe that because change happens, that it has to then pray tell that it's good because it's progress. It's a progressive look. Change is not always good. It's just not. You have the smartest people in the room are the ones who know actually what needs to stay the same and what should change. I want you guys to kind of understand, and as we look back at our own stories, as we look back at our parents and our childhood, and realize that we sometimes say a couple phrases. For instance, we say a lot of times, well, I turned out good, as to give a free pass for everything that happened before. Well, that's a horrible rationale. I don't even know what good means. I don't even know what turned out good means. I don't. You make a certain amount of money. You help a nun across the street. Like, what does that even mean? It doesn't mean much to me. And so I don't like the mentality of that we turned out good, so therefore that means something. It doesn't mean much. The other thing is, we a lot of times will look at things in our past, what we did not like, and we say, I said the same thing. I'm not going to raise my kids that way. And again, what do? It's the thing I talk about in so many episodes. We're here. We don't like here, so we go here. And again, we don't understand that here, where we were, isn't actually necessarily all bad. In this scenario, there's probably some good. We take a few of these components, we tweak a little thing, we get to a better place, but not necessarily 100% of a different place. There's so many examples of this. We say, well, here's a most common example that I can think of off the cuff. My parents were so strict. They, what's the word? They kept your innocence. Oh my goodness, I'm usually not short of words. They protected me from seeing this. They kept me I ended up being kind of naive, and then what happened when I went to college, or what happened when I got older? I went crazy. I was the biggest partier. I was the biggest this. And what we're saying is, if you are too strict with your kids, if you have too many expectations, too many rules, too many of this, then what happens is when this kid gets freedom over here, she is going to go crazy. Maybe that's college. Some of you are like, well, yeah, that's actually true. Okay. It is true to an extent, but again, we are looking at this so superficially. Let's come back over here again. Okay. We have Susie. Okay, I always say Susie. I don't know why I always say Susie. We have Susie. Let's go Kathy. I haven't done a Kathy in a while. This is Kathy. Switching names on you. Stay with me. So Kathy has very strict parents. Very structured, strict, lots of rules. Okay? And you're telling me that when Kathy goes to college, she's going to go crazy because of this. And sometimes this is connected to kind of even a conservative Christian mentality. Maybe, maybe not. Here's what you don't understand about Kathy's life. Kids love structure. Kids love rules. No, they don't. Yes, they do. What kids love within that is the relationship that they have with their parents. So the stronger the relationship you have, your rules are going to be a part of their morals, and they're less likely to rebel. When the rules that Kathy has are not tied to a relationship, they don't spend time with her. It's a very top-down approach to raising kids. Yeah, she probably is going to then, in that case, rebel. So then we fast forward 30 years, and we have now Kathy's a parent, and she's looking back at her childhood, and she's angry in her mind because of how strict her parents were. And now she's going to say, well, when I raise my kids, I'm going to listen to their feelings. We're going to walk through this life together, and it's going to be we're going to be friends. And it's a very watered down version of what a parent is supposed to be. Kathy didn't even diagnose her own childhood correctly. Do you see what I'm saying? So now Kathy as a parent is actually going in a further direction that's wrong, because she's taking the rules out of it, but she's going to have the relationship. But kids need both. They have to have both. I would actually argue that probably for, maybe not for the relationship, but for the child's well-being, if I was going to lose one, I'd lose a relationship, but I would have the structure and I have the rules no matter what. That can be argued. People may disagree with that, and maybe I'll disagree with it in 2 hours, but I'm pretty certain about that. So instead, now think about your story. I'm thinking about my story. Okay. I wanted to have closer relationships with my family. I wanted my family to be closer than they were. Now, please hear me on this. I love my family. And I'm going to get to something about that later. So I don't want to spoil anything yet. But I'm having to process my childhood, what I liked and didn't like. And then what am I going to do? Well, what I said as a teenager, I said, well, I was going to be all about the relationship. I'm going to spend more time. We're going to do family vacations. I'm going to be this type of dad. And I did. I in essence tried to do that and did that to the best of my ability. And that was I remember when I was, started dating my ex-wife, but the mother of my children. I remember I thought, off the bat, I thought her family, they're so close and they're so this and they're so that. Yeah, and we can almost life is confusing sometimes as an 18 to 25-year-old as you're processing your past and trying to figure out your future. And we just want to process accurately. Sometime later in my life, I'm going to start a coaching business just for people in their 20s only. Because this is a commercial message here, but because so often our life decisions happen in our 20s. And I just think the more wisdom and guidance we have, the better. Anyway, okay. So I think I kind of explained that. And this brings me to this place as I'm an 18-year-old. As my mom died at 16, my dad remarried, they've been married for 30 plus years now. So there's a lot of transition going on in my life, losing a mom, gaining my stepmom, but just it's chaos. And I'm trying to figure, and all I want to do is I just want to get married and have kids. Like literally as an 18-year-old, that's what I wanted to do. Maybe that's weird. I don't know. That was my stability. That was going to be my place of, okay, now I can do it my way. It was almost like a power grab a little bit back to me. Now, I'm going to say something. I'm going to go back to something about my mom, and then we're going to go to some other thoughts for today as we inch toward the season. You have to is this. When my mom died, the first thing that I said, and this is going to come up in later episodes, so if you're listening chronologically, this would be good. When my mom died, I said the following to myself as a 16-year-old. I sat down, and after 1 week, I wrote a poem. I was still buying her Christmas presents 1 or 2 years later to remind my younger siblings, because remember, I had a sister that was 2, a sister that was 7, a sister that was 12, a brother that was 14. So I felt and my dad's getting remarried, and I felt almost an obligation to be the keeper and the protector and the explainer of her legacy. I took on, in my own mind, I took on that responsibility. The other thing that I said to myself, though, that's more interesting, that's going to come up later, is I wanted to have the ability at any time to basically, I mean, what I would have said back then would have been cry. It was 16, 17. But I'll say it this way, as a 51-year-old, I wanted to keep her memory, her thoughts, her, like, everything about her, like, right here. I never wanted to get over it. I never wanted to move on. I was no desire. Like, my allegiance to her was tied to her life and her memory and my preservation of that. And so in my mind, getting over that, I know it's not exactly like this, but getting over that was the wrong move. Saying I'm getting to a place of comfortability with that? No, never. I'm never, and I'll say this right now, I'm never going to get to that place. I don't need to get to that place. My life and my responsibility is applauding hers, protecting hers, and explaining to my kids and anybody that listens to maybe a podcast episode or two what she did and why that was important. I love some of her old friends who are now I'm friends with them on Facebook, and some of the things that they say. It's a lot of very touching things. So that dynamic of me, of holding on to memories, holding on to her in essence, and always having kind of like a tender, soft spot for that, was something that I made that decision at 16. I've never wavered. Now, I'm going to get to something about that later on, not today. I want to kind of segue into a couple of things as we get towards the end of this. Remember, it all started on a beach. It all started on a beach. When I look at my children and their faith, some of my siblings and their faith, and just whatever, it's that guy. I wish I knew his name. I wish I could shake his hand. I'll meet him in heaven someday. But the trajectory of my family wasn't my mom and my dad, most likely. I'm going to say my mom would have still became a Christian. As I understand their story, she still would have. My dad would not have. They would not have ended up together. The story is completely different. Except for he was bold, and he made a decision that has affected now multiple generations and will continue throughout time to have that effect. How grateful and thankful I am for him. The song today is a song by Keith Green, which he was a popular Christian singer that came out of that time period, and the song is The Prodigal Son. Most of you guys, if you have any familiarity with the Bible, you know the story of the prodigal son. And talking about me being a son and my journey, I've been on all spectrums of that man and this parable, his two sons. I've said, screw you, Dad. I'm going to do it my way. Give me what's mine. This is mine. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out into the world and society and live for myself and live it up and live a very selfish existence. I've done that. I'm also going to be arrogant and condescending about, the decisions my dad makes, which is what the other brother did, which I've also done. And the beautiful part of that story for me is thinking that I have had this ability, is actually in large part to my stepmom, who helped me understand what it means to allow our parents just simply to love us and be our parents, and not trying to change, not try to control, not looking for an outcome, but live in those particular moments. So my prodigal son story is looking at my life, my family, my dad, and even now as a dad, my kids and future generations, and understanding that I am loved by God, by all those, in essence, people around me. And that gives me peace, as I'm not trying to control A, B, and C. I'm trying to simply live a particular type of life for God, for my family, and for those even that have already passed, such as my mom and grandparents, et cetera, et cetera. The parenting advice is, as we're looking back at our childhood and we're looking back at the amazing things our parents did, or the things that we wish we had as parents and what we want to become as parents, it's a simple formula. It starts with time. Give your time. No, give your time. Maybe a little bit more. And that time isn't actually, can be a 5-minute conversation. It can be simple things, but the time that equals actual connections. Consistent lessons. What do you want them to get out of, look at it as a business venture. What do you want your kids to get from you? What do you want them to learn from you? If they have a good relationship with you because you spend time with them, they may listen. They may not always listen, but they're listening. Even when it appears or not, they're listening. So you have the time component, you have the lessons, okay? And then it's live it out yourself. They're watching you, what you do. The older kids get, the more they learn about your mistakes. They're seeing everything. So get your stuff together, spend the time, develop the lessons, and I will tell you that I would not change the imperfections of my childhood, because God had a plan for everything that happened to me to happen for me for a specific reason. I'm grateful and thankful for that. As we close off, an exciting thing that's going to be happening in a couple episodes is we are going to start having sponsors of each episode. So if you have a small business and you would like me to promote your small business on this show, it's free. I don't need any money. That's not why I'm doing all of this. So I would appreciate just hit me up on social media. Let me know. We can talk and we can see if we can work it out. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 46. Appreciate it. Episode 47 will be fun, I promise. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Let's keep the conversation going. You can reach out on Ben's website, www.benkeechshow.com, or on social media to chat. And please remember to subscribe so that you never miss an episode.